This is my presentation on the Spanish Civil War. During World War I, Spain had stayed neutral. However, following the war, people of the Spanish society and their armed forces came together in desire of getting rid of their corrupted central government. This pre-stage part led into stage 1, which is government's weakness. Once the armed forces were sent out, they were unfortunately unsuccessful. Sometime later, Spain transitioned their government to military dictatorship because of a military group bringing a man named Miguel Primo de Rivera to power. He eventually resigned, but never came forward. This led into stage 2, which was intents to change government. Later on, a military revolt against the Republican government of Spain had come up. A starting military group was sent out to try and take control of the country, but they had no success. This led to a civil war breaking out, with two sides known as the Republicans versus the Nationalists. The Republicans gained aid from the Soviet Union as well as the International Brigades. They consisted of urban workers, agricultural laborers, and citizens of the educated middle class. As for the other side, which are the Nationalists, gained aid from Italy and Nazi Germany, and consisted of Roman Catholics, businessmen, landowners, and important elements of the military. This goes into stage 3, which was the spark. On July 17, 1936, military uprisings throughout Spain had started. By July 21st, the Nationalists took over and gained control of most of the Spanish Morocco and the Canary Islands and the Balearic Islands. Both sides claimed and organized more territory, and violence from the Republican side happened during the few other earlier stages of war before the rule of law was restored. As for the Nationalists, their violence was quoted as a conscious policy of terror, and it is said that their violence rate was higher, but nobody really knows. Both sides thought that they were too weak for any sort of quick victory, so they started to turn to new ideas. The Nationalists received aid from Germany and Italy as they sent out troops, tanks, and planes. For the Republicans, they gained aid from the Soviet Union, the Mexican government, and for the first few weeks, the Popular Front government in France. This goes into stage 4, which was the fall of government. And so through the time periods of November 1936 to October 1937, the Nationalists had advanced through the outskirts of Madrid and the northern coast. In April 1938, they drove a salient through Teruel that had reached the Mediterranean, splitting the Republic in two. 250,000 Republic soldiers and civilians fled across the border to France by February 1939. In Madrid on March 7th, a civil war began against communists and anti-communists, which was basically a civil war within a civil war. This goes into stage 5, government struggles, where on March 28th, the Republicans realized that they were not going to be able to win this fight and slowly surrendered as the Nationalists entered Madrid. On April 1st, General Francisco Franco, which was the leader of the Nationalist side, declared victory. Looking at the damage, you could say that around 500,000 had been killed by the Nationalists, as estimated in recent years. And it has even been said that the Spanish Civil War was one of the bloodiest disputes Western Europe has had since the end of World War I. There has even been information that Spaniards were sent to concentration camps in 1939, around the time of Republican soldiers fleeing to France, but unfortunately information on that is scattered, so it's kind of hard to tell. This goes into stage 6, which is peace and reflecting. Franco reviewed factions they hated labels as nationalists and tried to talk with them, but pretty much with no success. The whole country began to revolve around him, and so in 1947, the monarchy was revived, with obviously Franco still number one in power. In 1969, he chose his heir as Juan Carlos de Bourbon, and after Franco's death in 1976, Juan rose up and claimed power. Reviving democracy and modernizing the country, he reformed Spain. Slowly, the impact and pressure of the Civil War was released from the citizens' shoulders. This goes into the long-term effects, where even today, the dread and sorrow from the war is still remembered. And unfortunately, that sorrow can still sometimes turn into hatred, where fights break out amongst the sides. I couldn't really find a picture that's recent, but this is the closest I could get. Hopefully, this problem can be fixed soon, and people around can still respect each other despite what's happened in the past. Thank you for listening to my presentation.